Invincible is full of brutal and bloody events, but one of the most shocking and least talked about is the Great Purge, a civil war that tore through the entire Viltrumite race, wiping out half their species in an effort to eliminate the weak, so that only the purest would survive and become an unstoppable force. But here's the thing, this was probably the dumbest thing the Viltrumites could ever made, and that's saying something. The series itself tells us that Viltrumites weren't just the most advanced in terms of strength, they were supposedly masters of strategy too. Yet this event didn't just push them to the brink of extinction. It gave them a leader who may be tough and have the greatest haircut in the entire galaxy, but ended up steering them even further away from reaching their full potential. Unlike some of my other videos, this one's gonna have spoilers from the comics, so just a little warning if you aren't a comic reader. Let's start at the beginning. Viltrumites. Their defining trait is supremacism. They are the physical embodiment of survival of the fittest. In their culture, basic moral values like ours are not a thing. Back when they were conquering other planets, all they cared about was celebrating the Empire's victories, while discarding anyone who fell in battle as weak and worthless.
Lucan was weak. Now he's dead.
Then he deserved his fate.
Since forever, they've believed that the worth of a being or an entire species comes down to physical strength. The weak are seen as inferior and eliminated if necessary. Sure, they'd offer technological or medical advancements to other planets, but only if those planets swore absolute loyalty to their alien overlords. Basically, they wanted to inflate their ego by keeping others as obedient slaves. If a planet refused, the only possible outcome for them was annihilation. The Viltrumites' best era was probably under Emperor Argall. Unlike his regent successor, Argall valued intelligence and wisdom over brute force. This helped propel the Viltrumite civilization forward and earned him his people's loyalty. But don't get me wrong, he was still a firm believer in social Darwinism, a smart leader, but also ruthless toward anyone he deemed weak. Although most of their people blindly shared his ideology, one Viltrumite saw through the wickedness of their people, Thetis. Tired of the Emperor's atrocities, he became the first Viltrumite to betray the Empire by killing Argall himself. The Viltrumite Council tried to hide Argall's death at first, but eventually society began to crumble, leading to the events of the Great Purge. We don't know exactly what led them to make such a drastic decision, but it's likely they split into two factions, those who agreed with Argall's brutalist ideology and those who didn't. When Nolan explains the Great Purge to Mark, he says they had to eliminate the weakest to create a perfect society. We all assumed he meant physically weak, and sure, maybe that's partly true, but more likely it meant removing anyone who opposed the Viltrumite way, anyone unwilling to embrace their eliminate the inferior philosophy. If you pay attention to their language in the series, in most cases, weak doesn't mean physically inferior. It means emotionally aware or conscious enough to reject their cruelty, just like Nolan.
How did a mere moment on Earth turn you into a weak, sentimental traitor?
The funniest part? This battle wasn't even honorable. In the Season 1 flashback, we see Viltrumites attacking and murdering others from behind. Off-screen, you can bet many teamed up to take down lone opponents, and some others probably just hid until the massacre was over. So, only the strongest survived? Nah. Only those who fit the approved doctrine survived. Take Thula, one of the survivors of the Purge, for example. By logic, she should have been among the strongest of the strong, yet she was nearly beaten by Mark, who at that point was basically a Viltrumite toddler. That would be humiliating, right? Then there were the obvious consequences they didn't see coming. Not only did they wipe out half their population, they probably wiped out doctors, scientists, technicians, basically most of the people who knew how to keep society running. Maybe they advanced socially by uniting under the same ideals. But for everything else, they crippled themselves. But hey, maybe it wasn't that bad. I mean, they're still insanely powerful, right? Maybe. Until Viltrumite cancer. The coalition of planets attacked them with the Scourge virus, a lethal disease designed specifically to kill Viltrumites, basically their version of the Black Death. But given how advanced they were, they probably could have developed a cure and recovered, if it weren't for the fact that they murdered the very people capable of making it. As a result, the virus wiped out nothing less than 99% of their population, quite ironically, leaving them inches away from extinction. For such a smart race, they didn't really think this purge thing through. They basically nerfed themselves trying to buff themselves. They could have tried to reach an agreement and avoid this internal war, keeping at least a couple thousand of soldiers for the future. But that wasn't the Viltrumite way of doing things. Because of the virus, by the time of the series, only around 50 pure Viltrumites remained. So they came up with a plan. Send surviving soldiers to different planets to breed with other species, slowly rebuilding the population. But this didn't really go according to the plan for Nolan, as we know he ended up developing emotions during his time with humanity and became weak, as other Viltrumites would call it, which led him to rebel against the Empire and ally with Thetis and the coalition of planets to destroy what was once his home. Viltrum. An important detail is that after the Purge, the Viltrumites needed a leader to guide them after Argall's fall, someone to avenge the Emperor's death and find his heir to become the new ruler. They named Thragg, probably the strongest Viltrumite alive both physically and mentally, as their Grand Regent. I emphasize that he was chosen leader for his great strength and incredible hairline, but not for his wisdom. Remember this for later. So after Viltrum's destruction, Thragg murders Thetis, finally achieving his goal of avenging the Emperor. But he spares Nolan and Mark's lives, something he'll likely regret later. Then, he sent some of the few remaining Viltrumites to Earth, with the same goal of silently breeding with humans. But just like Nolan, they ended up developing feelings for their partners on Earth and refused to complete their mission. I mean, can you blame them? Thragg was crashing out because of this. Not only was he losing soldiers, he was losing the loyalty of his people. When he found out that Nolan was Argall's son, and thus he was the true heir to the throne, he tried to kill him, believing he wasn't fit to rule for being a traitor. But Freddie Mercury couldn't have been more wrong. Nolan achieved more for his people in just a few years than Thragg did in centuries. He broke the supremacist and violent tradition of his people, showing them how much they could accomplish with their strength if they used it to resolve conflicts peacefully, instead of using it to dominate planets and rule a universe living in fear of annihilation. Thragg never managed to make the remaining Viltrumite civilization advance was because he made the same mistakes as his predecessor. He led them with desires for vengeance and violence instead of diplomacy. And that mindset is exactly what cost them their civilization and the loyalty of the few who remained. He showed to care about the well-being of his people at times, but deep down all he wanted was to conquer and destroy all those who opposed him. A prodigious warrior, but a terrible leader due to his selfish nature. So basically, the Great Purge, that was meant to make the Viltrumites unstoppable and pure, instead brought them to the edge of total extinction, destroyed their homeworld, and interestingly led them to develop the same emotions they slaughtered others for during this event. For those unwilling to change, it was the dumbest decision possible. For the rest of the universe, maybe the best outcome they could have hoped for. So that's my take on the Great Purge and the Viltrumites in general. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to like and subscribe. Drop your thoughts in the comments, or pitch me ideas for the next one. Thanks for watching, and see you on the next one.